on the acting career, you were going to be an actor, right? You wanted to do musical theater. You wanted to dance on stage. You wanted to do all of those things. And you were in some movies, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be, when I was in college, I got to be in a James Bond movie, Moonraker, and had a small part. And
what made you, maybe it was your family business, but, could you have seen yourself in a Hollywood career or not really?
That's what I was trying to, when you're a kid, you're trying to find what works. I'd grown up in the oil well servicing and oil and gas business. And, listen, it provided a great education and a lot of benefits. And so I can't complain about anything.
Hello there, M&A Advisor community. This is Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome back to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor's mission is to recognize achievements, provide thought leadership, and connect professionals in mergers and acquisitions for the purpose of improving your deal-making craft and accelerating your deal flow. We are so glad you're joining us for this insightful and inspiring podcast conversation curated for mergers and acquisitions professionals. Whether you're an aspiring deal maker, a seasoned professional, or just curious about the world of mergers and acquisitions, you'll find something valuable and relevant in our podcast. Our goal is to bring you the best insights, stories, and tips from the experts who've been there and done that, so you can learn from their successes and mistakes and take your deal-making skills to the next level. But before we dive into today's episode, we have a small favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast and find it useful, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribing to our M&A Alerts newsletter. You can find the links in the description below. This will help us reach more people like you and grow our community of M&A professionals. It will also let us know that you appreciate our work and want us to keep producing more quality content for you. Plus, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll always be in the loop with the latest trends in the M&A world to improve and accelerate your deal making. So please follow us. You are the reason we do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. And now for today's podcast. Hello, M&A Advisor community, and welcome to an insightful episode of the M&A Advisor podcast. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Stay tuned as I dive into insightful conversations with top experts in M&A, distressed investing, restructuring, and corporate finance. You won't want to miss their valuable insights. As spring 2025 draws near, the M&A Advisor world eagerly awaits the transformative days of March 24th and 25th. We're gearing up for the highly anticipated 2025 Distressed Investing Summit set in sunny paradise of West Palm Beach, Florida. This premier event will showcase game-changing ideas, innovative solutions, and strategies shaping the M&A and distress landscape, which includes restructuring and turnarounds. M&A professionals and deal makers can't afford to miss this opportunity to enhance their distressed investing and turnaround deal making. Building on the momentum of the pivotal 2025 Distressed Investing Summit, the M&A Advisor podcasts further amplify the industry's leading voices, offering a platform for in-depth discussions and insights that drive excellence in M&A. And in this context, we're excited to welcome a distressed investing, restructuring, and turnaround industry expert and thought leader who also was recognized for a Lifetime Achievement Award for the Turnaround Awards last year. Today, we're joined by Drew McGanigal, founder and CEO of Mako Restructuring Group. Welcome, Drew.
Hi, nice to be with you, Roger.
Well, I'm going to perhaps give a little bit of background for those folks who are joining us for the first time. You may not have, if this is your first M&A Advisor podcast, I go over why we're interviewing some of these stalwarts and get an in-depth look at their careers. But it would be great if we just had a little bit of context on Drew's background, and let me do that. Drew's global experience extends across a wide variety of industries and has personally led numerous companies in and out of court restructurings. After a successful independent career in business restructuring, Drew founded Mako in 1993 in Houston, Texas, driven by his strong belief that businesses in crisis and the individuals who own or manage them deserve access to affordable, straightforward solutions. Drew and his team have been a longtime friends of the M&A Advisor, earning numerous accolades over the years. Most recently, as I said before, Drew was honored as a Leadership Award recipient at the 18th Annual Turnaround Awards and was inducted into the M&A Advisor Hall of Fame at the 2024 Future of Dealmaking Summit last November. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Houston. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to have him on our podcast today. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Right. Terrific. That's a pretty long career. I think there are a number of people. You know, we gave you a leadership award. I think maybe next year we'll give you the Lifetime Achievement Award. I mean, maybe I mistakenly called it a Lifetime Achievement. You definitely have been in this industry quite a long time. How long would you define your career in this? How many years, how many decades?
It's been almost, I guess, 40 years now. I actually got into restructuring in 80, I think it was 82 or 83. So it's been a long progression since I first got into it. But actually, I learned about restructuring when I was in private enterprise in a family business that went through the oil and gas crash of the 80s that resulted in 646 Texas banks failing. And unfortunately, we had a pretty good sized family business in the Permian Basin of West Texas. And we were caught up in, one of the banks that failed. And, then we dealt with the FDIC for a few years. And of course, by that time, the economics of the oil and gas business, much as they did in 2015, 16, 17, were on the downward trend. And we got caught in a vice grip of bad economics and the FDIC. And that's where I first learned all about Chapter 11 bankruptcies and liquidating plans and creditors' rights and all that good stuff.
Well, let's take a step back. I know we had an earlier podcast with you that was recorded at our Distressed Investing Summit in last year in 2023. And we talked a little bit about your bio, but you were sharing the stage with someone else. So I'm going to maybe go a little bit deeper here. Did you started working for your family business? Was that right after college, or did that just happen? Is that what you wanted to do? You were attending college and you knew you were going to be at your family business. What was going through your mind as someone in college and looking for the next 40 years of their career?
You're going to laugh. It wasn't on my radar because actually, before I realized that my talent was suspect and I was too tall, I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to get into the movie business because I found it fascinating, where you had to take something intangible and turn it into something tangible. But,
so you were at the University of Houston. Did you take any acting classes or anything like that? Or you?
Oh, I did when I was at Texas Tech. I started at Texas Tech and finished at the University of Houston. And I did when I was at Texas Tech, and when I was a kid in high school, used to do a lot of theater and musicals and that kind of stuff. And it all started because when I was a kid, I was a really big kid. I'm 6'5" now, but I was a big kid. And so I always got to play the Santa Claus in school plays in elementary school.
I know you were a big kid when you were younger, right?
Oh,
so you were playing the
adults,
I guess, right?
Exactly. But the what happened, and this is just candidly honest about most family businesses of whatever size. Our family business went through some real issues between majority shareholders who were my parents, and my father passed, and then my mother was a majority shareholder. One brother was running the business. The other brother was the executive vice president. And, there was tension there, and it finally bubbled up to the point where, the company split apart, and I ended up, at the worst possible timing of buying both my brothers out, who I might add were about 14 and 16 years older than I was at the time. I was about 22 or 23.
And it was in the oil and gas business. So you had to hang up your shingle on the acting career because you needed now let's just before you jump into turnaround, we'll get into turnarounds and distress and how that worked out. But you were going to be an actor, right? You wanted to do musical theater. You wanted to dance on stage. You wanted to do all of those things. And you were in some movies, right?
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to be, when I was in college, I got to be in a James Bond movie, Moonraker, and had a small part in.
Now, I remember going to that movie. And little did I know when you were on that screen that I was watching you.
Well, I'm pretty sure I may have the distinction of being the only actor of any nature that was wearing cowboy boots when he was being filmed. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay. Now, what was that? What was the role that you were? So Moonraker, it was Roger Moore was James Bond, right?
Roger Moore, and I was fortunate in getting to know the director, Lewis Gilbert, and his wife, Hilda, and that led into the part over a summer vacation, essentially. And so I had the role of Q's assistant, but I got to stand there with Q, Desmond Llewellyn, and Roger as we watched dummies and things blow up, the special effects stuff. And it was a lot of fun. And then I got to hang out in Italy, in Venice, where we were shooting those particular scenes at a monastery.
Wow.
And got to work behind the camera as a third assistant director or assistant to the director. So I really got a good feel for how big movies got put together, and, the issues and the timing and all the people. I mean, it's really like which is what I always thought, but movies are like, pretty good, depending on the movie size, a company that you have somewhere between 2 and 4 months to put together. And this means catering, accountants, actors, the camera guys, carpenters, electricians, the entire plethora of a company. And they have to come together at a location or diverse locations and fit together and work together to produce a product. That
and hopefully it's a good product. I mean, when at the end of a movie or a TV series or something like that, I mean, the credits roll on for like 15 minutes, right?
That's exactly right.
Thousands of people, especially with a big budget film or even a small budget film, but a big budget, certainly a big budget film like James Bond 007. That must have been an amazing experience for you as like college. You were 19, 20, 21 years old.
Yeah. And it absolutely was. And that was the thing that had always fascinated, I've always been a big movie fan, like a lot of people, but that was the thing that always fascinated me about the movie industry itself, whether it was just during the studio times or independent film companies or whatever, how they, the expertise that you had to have in a leadership role to pull that together as a producer or as a director, or how to manage it, through the various phases. Because, putting the movie company together to make the movie is just, the first couple pieces. And then you've got a whole group of people while you're editing the movie and creating the music for the movie, and bringing that all together before you
all of the post-production there.
Yeah.
So the most interesting part that I hopefully maybe our listeners would want is, how did you get the role? Did you have to audition? Did someone discover you in, West Texas? What happened?
No,
or East Texas. Houston's in East Texas.
Yeah. Well, no, I was in West Texas at the time.
Oh, okay.
So a good friend of ours in high school, James Bullock, was a really good actor. And he went out to California and he did the entire Starving Artist routine. We used to go out and visit him, and he was working, I think, at a Bob's Big Boy while he was going to auditions and stuff. But he was really good. I mean, hugely talented. And he went on to have a career on several sitcoms and Hollywood Squares and, on and on and on. But at one point we were talking on the phone and he said, listen, I'm going to leave Strasbourg, which was an acting school. And he said, you have to audition, but I mentioned you and why don't you come out and see if you can get in? Well, short answer, I went out, I auditioned, I got in. And so I spent the summer in California. And while I was there was, I met this nice little old English couple, this fine English gentleman, so unobtrusive that you would have never met him. And one day he said to me, if you're here for a while, my wife and I are here for a while, why don't you go to the movie with us? And I said, great, would love to. A couple of weeks went by. So we're sitting in Westwood, California, watching the trailer for the James Bond movie that was out at the time, which was The Spy Who Loved Me. And so, the trailer comes out, and it shows Willie Bogner skiing off the cliff, and the music and the whole thing. And then then the credits start coming up and it's like Lewis Gilbert, director. That's this little guy sitting next to me. And I looked at him and he loved to play practical jokes. And he said, I thought you'd like that, darling, and he knew I was out there. And so we had a great summer. I wasn't so crazy about acting school, candidly. And, but had a great summer, got to go to studios.
Well, you had the look. You had the look, right? It's all about the look.
It's all about the look.
Yeah.
And went back to college and, kept in touch over the year. And the following summer, just kept in touch and made a phone call. And he said, look, come over, to England, if you can do it, and you can stay at our house. And I've got a little part for you, in Venice. And so I went into my family and I said, so here's the deal. And, can we make that work? And they said, yes. And my oldest brother looked and smiled and he said, don't come back. So,
well, a summer in Venice. I mean, I don't think that's not a bad thing.
It was not a bad gig. Yeah, no, it was not a bad gig at all.
Now you had to pay for your trip over there and everything like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you stayed in the director's house.
Well, we stayed in the director's house and, I used to get regular phone calls from my brothers who were running the company going, so, we're not like billionaires, right? So, yeah, I know, I got it. But they were generous and it was a lifetime experience.
Yeah, no, that's good. And hey, you got into the, did you have was it a speaking role or did you say anything?
Yeah, I did. And I'm still pretty grumpy about it, as a matter of fact.
Really?
After all these years.
So you get the residuals. You get the residuals?
No, that's really not it, Roger. What I'm really grumpy about is I had two lines and Desmond Q we watched this thing blow up, and he turned to me as his assistant and said, have that ready for Army Day. And my line was, yes, sir. And I am still mad. That was an award-winning line if I ever heard one, and I didn't get it. And I'm still
no. That's actually not two lines. That's two words. So.
Oh well, now we're splitting hairs. See, that goes to my.
All right.
point.
So, but I thought the union, the actors union, you would get residuals from that. I mean, you should get a check of like 20 cents a year or something for that.
Exactly. Less than that. I don't think. I don't know. I don't think I was a member of SAG at the time. So, I got paid. I'm trying to remember I got paid some little check. I don't even remember what it was for, but it wasn't much.
Well, I would think listen, you paid for your trip over, or your family paid for the trip over, or maybe some spending money, but you you got room and board from the director. So, hey, I think that was a good deal.
It was a good deal. It absolutely was a good
Well,
deal.
okay. So then you come back after the summer, after the principal shooting is going on. You come back to the company. Maybe a year later, the movie comes out, and so everybody goes to the movie. You go to the movie premiere. What's going on then?
We went back to school, and you're exactly right. The premiere came out, and my wife at the time and I went to New York and saw Roger and everybody again, and had a big time. And I got to stand in the back.
You got to go to the premiere. That's cool.
Yeah, no, it was very cool. And one of the, Roger Moore was one of the nicest men in the world, and I got to spend a lot of time with him just by virtue of being with the director. And I will never forget. We were Cubby Broccoli, who was with the producer, and Lewis, and all of us jumped in a limousine. We were going someplace in New York, and I got to tag along. And so I just jumped in the front seat, because the back seat was pretty filled with people. And Roger leaned up, the glass was down, leaned up, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "It sure is nice to have you riding shotgun for me again." And that was pretty cool.
That was nice. And then, so any other movies that you did, or was that it?
No, I did. I had a chance to do another one called Educating Rita with Michael Caine that we shot in Dublin over about 14 or 15 weeks. Same director, Lewis Gilbert. And I worked more behind the camera during that filming than I did in front of the camera, but I had another, little bit part with Michael Caine where I played the bouncer in a discotheque. And so, these are all award-winning roles, and I just don't know I wasn't noticed.
Yeah. So, but I guess, sort of in front of the camera, that look, you got to have the look, you got to have, all of those types of things. And usually shorter people get those roles than taller people, I think.
Yeah. But Michael Caine was a big guy.
Was he? Okay.
Oh yeah, he's like 6'2", 6'3", and Roger was about 6'2" or so.
Yeah. But behind the scenes there are, thousands of people. What made you? Maybe it was your company, your family business, but could you have seen yourself in a Hollywood career or not really?
That's what I was trying to. When you're a kid, you're trying to find what works. I'd grown up in the oil well servicing and oil and gas business. And, listen, it provided a great education and a lot of benefits. And so I can't complain about anything. I like it culturally. There were a lot of the aspects about the business that I just loathed. Because it seemed to me, some of my earliest memories are my father taking a phone call at 3:00 in the morning, and that happened pretty regularly. And when you're in the oil and gas business or oil well servicing or anything aligned to it, like Landman, the current series Landman that everybody's talking about, that's pretty accurate. But when the phone rings at 3 a.m, it's never good news. And I kind of grew up in that atmosphere, and I can still roll over at 3:00 in the morning if the phone rings and pick it up, and I'm immediately wide awake. But I always recognized, and don't ask me why, I always recognized that, my God, there's not only is this a really hard business, not only is this a really dangerous business, but it's almost like you can never get ahead. And
this was your family's business was just for the audience, exploration and drilling. Is that what you were doing?
Well, that was one small piece of it that we invested in, but our main business was oil well servicing. We had oil well servicing rigs, which were like small mobile drilling rigs, only smaller, that you drive from location to location, that provides oil well completion services and remedial workover services on new oil wells or on existing oil wells.
So they already know that there's oil there. You're not exploring. You're
Right.
tapping into something that's already existing, and
Right. If you
this
have
is a well that's already producing oil.
So if you've already drilled the well, then after the big drilling rig is moved off, then you'd move in like one of our rigs and rig it up with the derrick and the whole thing to, put in the production string with the tubing or the tubing
That's
and
pretty
the rod
capital
string.
intensive, though. I mean, it's pretty capital
Oh,
intensive to have these drills. How many drills did you have?
we had 14 or 15 workover rigs,
Okay.
and some of them could work very deep. Each rig had a 4-man crew, and a pickup and a trailer. And, it's like the oil and gas business today. Some of these guys, great workers, good-hearted men, technically very proficient, but, a lot of them didn't have, a ninth grade education. And some of them, at the end of the day, it wasn't their money. And so,
Yeah.
if they dropped 10 wrenches over here or, 4 box of, rubber goods over there or whatever it was, oh, well, it's not really my money. And I used to watch that all the time. I mean, and even when I was running the company, it used to just drive me nuts. We'd spend a zillion dollars on hand tools every year just because people were careless, screwdrivers here. Oh, I'll borrow this and take it home and won't bring it back. And, you multiply that, by
Does that happen all the time?
governments and
Wow.
people. Yeah.
Lost
So
tools. Okay. Everybody
caused me-
loses
I mean-
a screwdriver.
Yeah. So it just struck me very early on in my life that, not only is it difficult and dangerous, but how do you get ahead? I mean, how do you get ahead in this business? And it didn't seem to me that there was a particularly good answer for that.
So the banks had a lot of debt on these. They had what, capital leases, all of that on these rigs, right? You had to borrow
Yep.
money.
Yep. You borrowed
you
money
know,
you borrowed money to buy them and then pay them
Yep.
off and buy another couple.
Yep.
Sometimes you'd reach manufacturing deals to buy 5 or 6 or at a time from the manufacturer, spaced over a couple of years.
Yep. So then what happened with your family business? Did the oil, the price of oil went down? What happened? The exploration was
Yeah. After I bought my
oh
brothers out, was in 1980, I think. The first year or so went along swimmingly. I mean, we were,
I mean,
very,
oil
very-
and gas were through the roof at the time, right?
yeah, we were doing really, really
Gas
well.
shortages, right? Gas shortages. We were going through I think a recession, but
That's
the gas lines, I remember the gas lines, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Matter of fact, I remember at our company, we actually had a waiting list of people who needed a workover rig for something, whatever the service was, and who couldn't get one. And so we actually had a waiting list of people that we called and say, okay, we've got a rig ready. When do you want us to get it to your location? And so that was the environment we were in, and it was very go. And we were looking at ordering. I ordered 1 rig, and we were looking to order 2 or 3 more. And then it started decreasing. And then the next thing you know, I get a call from a friend of mine in Odessa. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, Drew," and I must have been 22 now. And he said, "Have you ever heard of a bank closing?" And I said, "No, never, not since, the Great Depression." He said, "Well, I just got a call from a friend of mine in Oklahoma, in this funny little bank called Penn Square Bank, which is in a shopping center or something, was closed by the FDIC."
Yep.
And he said, "I've never heard of that before either." And I said, "No, that's weird." Well, that was the beginning of the end of everything.
Yeah.
Um,
Where the banks were, credit became tight.
well, the credit had been very, very, very loose because, the energy business had been
Yep.
going through a boom. And there were absolutely.
But you relied on credit to keep it going. You relied on the credit to keep it going, cash flow, or not really?
No, not particularly. I mean, we relied on credit for buying rigs,
or your clients, or maybe your clients relied on credit, right?
Exactly right. And
so the industry relied on the credit. The credits dried up, and therefore they couldn't pay you anymore, right?
Well, that's true. And what also happened was, because of that, and because of the competitive nature of the well servicing industry, people started dropping their rates to get business. The old, I'll drop my rate, the old rate in volume conundrum. And that started going. So rig rates went from, let's say, all in, and this includes crew, everything else, let's say all in $400 an hour. When I finally said I've had enough, it was down to $89 an hour.
So you got squeezed and you were losing money.
Right. And it didn't help that the bank was closing, that the bank was closed by the FDIC in 1983.
The bank that you had a relationship
business with. Yeah. The bank that we did business with was closed by the FDIC.
Yeah. So, but you still had but you still had your money though, right? I mean, it was.
Right. We did.
Okay. So then you decided to exit, close down the company?
Well, we were losing money, and then rig rates were being more depressed, and the entire, gas business was suffering from terrible compression, and banks were being closed. Midland National Bank closed. A lot of banks began to fall because of their energy loans. Drilling companies were going out of business. And, I negotiated and kept the company alive, I think, for 2.5 years after the bank closed, dealing directly with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And we kept running the business and trying to make it better. We mothballed some rigs. We cut costs. We reduced the fleet size. We closed a New Mexico branch. All the typical stuff that you do when you're trying to cut costs. And the rate compression was such that, and back to my earlier comment about how expensive it is just to be in that business. I mean, if you have it's just not unusual to have a particular piece of equipment fail, and it doesn't cost like $200 to fix it or $500 to fix it. It costs $25,000 to fix it.
Yeah, and this was back in the 1980s, in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly so the revenue dried up. So you had to exit out of the business, and then what did you, what was next? You call up the director and say, hey, look, you have any more parts open? You have any more movies going on?
Yeah. Well, I wish it had been that easy. That boat had already, sailed.
Yeah.
And so what I was left with was looking at the business and looking at the economics. And I said, this is stupid. I mean, you just have to be stupid to stay in this. And so I talked to our shareholders, and, I shut the business down. And in conjunction with that, I started talking to some restructuring advisors and restructuring attorneys, and ended up hiring one of each. And, we talked about, is it salvageable? Is it not salvageable? And it was my opinion then, and I don't think I was wrong, and it was their opinion, it wasn't salvageable. So we did something kind of unique at the time in the Western District of Texas, is we filed we filed the petition, the schedules and statements of the debtor, the disclosure statement, and the plan all on the same day. And so it was almost like a precursor to a pre-pack that you hear about all the time now, but we did that in 1980.
Well, the bankruptcy laws were relatively new, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Federal bankruptcy laws, right? I mean, I didn't know if Texas had their own bankruptcy, you know, things that they had to do. I mean, how did you? I mean, not to get too technical here, but were there separate things you had to do on a federal level versus a state level?
No, federal bankruptcy law is all incorporated under the federal bankruptcy code and Title 11 of USC 11 and Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, and the individuals and the liquidation under Chapter 7. That's all under federal law. So state law doesn't really come into play. So it's all federal based.
So you were testing, or your lawyers and the restructuring lawyers were sort of testing or trying to work in this new paradigm called bankruptcy, right? All these new bankruptcy laws, right?
Well, these guys had been in it for a while and were being quite successful because there were a lot of people going broke. I wasn't, and my family wasn't the only one. In the Western District of Texas, which is where the bankruptcy court was held under, God rest his soul, Judge Joe Elliott, you could go over to the Hilton Hotel in Midland when court was in session, and the restaurant and the bar would be packed with bankruptcy lawyers and their clients. So it was pretty endemic in the industry. I mean, Odessa became a ghost town. Midland got hit. It was very, very tough times for businesses, for families, for marriages.
So
for
you
the
got
economy
into
overall.
this business. Let's fast forward a little bit here. You got into this business from being an operator, and figuring out how to restructure or have a liquidating bankruptcy, I guess, like a liquidation, right?
That's exactly right.
To try to return as much capital to your investors or to your partners, right?
Well,
I guess the bank.
No.
Right?
Well, no,
Okay.
actually, no, because it's actually, it's order in bankruptcy is an order of priority. There's administrative claims, senior secured claims, unsecured claims, etc. But, when you're a debtor, your fiduciary obligation is to try to maximize the value of the estate and the assets of the estate for all creditors.
Yep.
Now, who gets them is going to be depending who's on top,
Right.
Who's got the strongest lead or the lowest.
And were you
lead
able to? So in summary, you were able to return as much as you could. I mean, just.
Well, in our case, it was actually pretty interesting because the FDIC kind of screwed up and they didn't refile, or the bank screwed up, whoever did. So they didn't have valid liens on our assets. So they were, the secured lender was pari passu, which means equal to all the unsecured creditors. So when I helped liquidate all the assets,
they didn't perfect their lien. There's no UCC, nothing on there.
That's right. So when I helped liquidate the company, there was a pool of money, and the liquidating agent at the time actually made a distribution to all creditors, including the unsecured creditors, which put a smile on my face because many of those people had known me and my family, all the way back to my father.
Good for you. So they got a pari passu. That's good. So then, okay, let's fast forward a little bit. Then right after this, you said, "Hey, look, I'm an operator. And I went through this. What could I do this for other people?" Right? Is that what you thought about doing, or did you start running another company?
No, there was an interim step. His name is Harry Perrin, and he's a famous lawyer, bankruptcy lawyer in Houston. He had been down there. He just retired from Denson and Elkins, as a matter of fact. And I'm proud to say he is a dear, dear friend of mine. But he was also our bankruptcy lawyer, way back when we were both young men.
Yeah.
So I'd gone down to Houston to play golf. And, this was back when you could get up at 6 a.m. and have a cup of coffee and a Marlboro Red and not feel bad about yourself. And he asked me, he said, "So."
Well, you were a movie star, so, you could.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
You could do those things.
But he said, he asked me, he said, "Harry," he looked at me, he said, "What are you going to do with yourself?" And I said, "Well, Harry, there's not a very big market for former presidents of oil well servicing companies, and the oil and gas business is on its backside. I guess I'm going to go out and find myself a job someplace. And he paused for a second. And he said, well, what would you think about working for our firm? And at the time they had 4 partners, 3 or 4 associates in Houston. And I said, well, Harry, how does that work since I'm not a lawyer? And he said, look, you're the only client I've ever had who went out and bought a bankruptcy code and read through it. He said, you're the only client I've ever had who would call me up and go, so this 363B asset sale thing, can't we make that work for us? And he said, everybody at the firm knows you. You're getting divorced. You want to move to Houston. And he said, look, you'll have everybody likes you. You know how the bankruptcy code works. I'm sure we can figure out some things that you can help us with. And because we're doing a lot of oil and gas bankruptcies. And, you can have a nice office and wear your suits, and I'm not going to pay him much of anything. And it sounded like the greatest deal in the world. So I did that. And, I started over.
Did you get paid upon the business you brought in?
No, I got paid a little salary for working as the only non-lawyer in the law firm, but I gained tremendous experience. It was almost like an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And it was really fabulous. I knew, Harry well. I got to know his partner, Tom Kirkendall, very well. Both became, colleagues and friends. And I got to do a lot of things that I'm not sure you could do these days. And you also have to remember that the restructuring industry at the time wasn't what it is today. J. Alex had only formed J. Alex in 1981. The Turnaround Management Association, I think, was a year or two before or a year or two after that. So it was a pretty young industry. So there was a lot of trying to figure out, what do you do with this bag of skills that you have? I know how to run a company. Okay, I understand bankruptcy. Well, do I go to law school? What do I do with that exactly? And it took a few years to figure it out. And then when I did, because I decided, I liked hiring lawyers, I didn't want to be one. But by that time, I'd had a pretty good reputation around town about being able to solve difficult problems appropriately. And so I hit the glass ceiling at the law firm. I wasn't going to law school. I'd kind of talked to recruiters, and that wasn't floating my boat. I'd been in business on my own. So I started my firm in 1992. And
you started Mako right after the law
firm.
Yeah. And you said, look, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I guess. And
that's exactly right.
I'm not going back to law school.
Right.
I'm doing that.
No.
Right.
That's exactly right. And,
so weren't that restructuring companies yet, right?
No.
Of note.
And there were a number. I mean, restructuring goes in waves. It's like everything else, but there were, everybody was still pretty busy.
Well, you had J. Alex. J. Alex was out. Alvarez and Marcel. Were they?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember when Alvarez and Marcel started out. I think they were at a big accounting firm before, but I'm not sure. I know I was around when Price Waterhouse started their business turnaround services, which was their restructuring group. And God, that must have been in the mid to late 80s.
So here's your part of the podcast where you talk about your firm. What does Mako do? What's your focus? How many people you have? Types of clients, the services that you offer.
Well, we're a very focused financial advisory and interim management firm. We work with clients and companies that are in some type of financial distress. And sometimes we get hired as chief restructuring officers, sometimes as interim CEO or presidents. I serve as an independent director lots of times. And our firm's made up of a very just tremendous group of business professionals. I think we're about up to 18 people now across the country, based in Houston, with locations from Las Vegas through Denver, Wilmington, Philly, and New York. And we're growing. And we've accomplished a lot in the last 5 years since I reimagined the firm from my old, kind of single shingle days. But our focus is really different than typical restructuring firms in that we are just very solutions based. And the typical consulting model is such that you get the engagement and then you throw as many people as you can at it, because that's a billing exercise. So everybody's billing, analyzing everything, billing everything, as fast as they can for as long as they can until somebody says, please stop. And oh, by the way, the company's broke. The company's in some type of operational distress. I mean, we've all seen the bankruptcy fees over the last 20 years. So our focus is really 180 degrees from that. And what I always like to say is if I can find a solution for our clients in 15 minutes, I'm very happy to bill you for 15 minutes, shake hands and go home. If it takes us a little bit longer, well, then it takes us a little bit longer. But what we do is work ourselves into the position so we can find that solution so that we can implement that solution for our clients and leave them hopefully in better shape than when we got there.
So you would take over at times, take over the company or help with management. Okay. You're operating. Your focus is more on operations, not necessarily advisory or investment banking, right?
No, we don't do investment banking at all. It's advisory and interim management, and those two are linked. And it really depends on the engagement. We serve as financial advisors.
What
to
percentage
companies
say is advisory versus interim management? Or do you need to oftentimes be the interim management because you need to execute upon the advice that you give? And, sometimes this management team is in this position because of the management team.
That's right. Well, that's exactly right. And it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes we'll come in as a chief restructuring officer working with management, and the firm Matco might serve as financial advisor as well. Oftentimes we'll serve as an interim officer, and then I'll bring Matco in as a financial advisor to help me implement, the restructuring plan, whatever that is. But what you find, and what I found over these many years is that you keep seeing the same scenario over and over again in companies in distress, and it's, I like to tell, it's just not rocket science. They're overextended, bad acquisitions, bad management, bad ideas that nobody will say that's a bad idea. I mean, look at Bed Bath and Beyond is just a classic example of a really, really bad idea. Let's brand everything Bed Bath and Beyond instead of selling Hinkle's knives or Lennox China. And nobody in the company said, this is a bad idea. And it killed them at the end of the day. So, you see the same problems.
Did you work on that transaction or?
No, okay. No, we didn't.
Any transactions that you're proud of, or maybe give an example of, maybe it doesn't have to be a brand name, but something you've worked on that demonstrates your firm's ability?
Yeah. And something I'm very proud of, David Weinhofer, who's one of our managing directors in Houston, worked on and I call it the Laforte case. It's got a long name because it's Portuguese, but at the Laforte case, he was chief restructuring officer and essentially came in a Chapter 11 that was filed in Houston and took over a drill ship that was located 4 nautical miles off the coast of Tampico, Mexico, owned by a company that hadn't paid their people, had paid for the fuel, it just went on and on and on. It was a nightmare. And David jumped in there along with Matco, working as financial advisor, and over a reasonably short period of time, got control of it, worked through all the Mexican regulatory issues, worked through all the bankruptcy issues and the Mexican regulatory issues, and were able to resolve a plethora of those seemingly unwindable matters while dealing with the bondholders, the creditor groups, and all the stuff you have to do in bankruptcy. And fast forwarding, the end result was that he gained control of the rig, got the finances under control, got a dip facility put together, actually was able to resolve a lot of the creditor issues in Mexico, transported this gigantic drill ship. I mean, it's just enormous, across the Gulf of Mexico during hurricane season, got it into Freeport and birthed it in Freeport, Grand Bahamas, and sold it for $60 million. And
I think it's called the Gulf of America now, but
it's Gulf of America. That's exactly right. I stand corrected. But we won an award for that, for Asset Sale of the Year. And that's the kind of work.
Congratulations on that. When was that?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Congratulations. You won I would presume an M&A Advisor award for that.
Yeah. And ABI as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think it's hanging on the back of on your back right shoulder.
I think that's right.
And your leadership award is on your back left shoulder. So that's, I don't know about the other two things that are hanging up there, but congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, there's a leadership award in my Hall of Fame. So
the Hall of Fame one, right?
Both of those are very near and dear to my heart.
Well, congratulations on that. So what would you say is for Macco Restructuring, what is your, sort of unique aspect? Why should people, give Drew and Macco a call for, their transactions or their companies, or if they're, when should they be talking to you, and why should they be hiring you?
Yeah, sooner rather than later. Everybody, and I don't know why this is, but everybody waits too late. We typically get a call on Friday. My client has a problem. What's the problem? Well, they can't make payroll on Tuesday. Yeah. But everybody always waits too late to call restructuring advisors. And I'm not really sure why that is, other than they just don't want to face the harsh reality of the situation. Right? Yeah. And that's human nature. And I get it. But, our focus, and I can say this, my son's in the Navy, and with all due respect to the Navy and the SEALs, we like to consider ourselves the SEAL Team 6 of business. We don't fool around. We get a call, we're professional, our skills stay honed, and, we load up, clip up, jump in the chopper, go wherever we're going to go, and jump out and say, who's first? And that's really kind of how we operate. We do not dawdle. We jump right in. We find out what the problem is, the analysis of the company and its problems. We can do remarkably quickly because all of us have run companies. All of us have been,
I think your operations focused. It sounds like your operations focused is the separator from other firms. No?
That's absolutely right. And not only operationally focused, but we all have experience. This is never our first rodeo. And so it allows us to go into any situation and recognize what the issues are very, very rapidly, which means you can start developing solutions at a rapid rate too, because you've seen it before. You know what it feels like. All of us, I can sit with the CEO and I know when he's BSing me. I've been a CEO. I know what that sounds like, or with the board, as an example. Yeah. So it allows us to move with alacrity and confidence, and I think that really is a difference, and then I think makes us unique in the restructuring industry.
Listen, you're part of the Hall of Fame. We have, especially at our September event, we recognize emerging leaders, some of the younger folks. It used to be called 40 under 40, but we realized, capping it at 40 was not, especially with so many young folks out there. Any advice to, those in their, earlier in their career? Obviously you kind of were, if you will, fell into this, right?
Yeah.
through no choice of your own, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And any advice for those? Because we always need to mentor, the up and coming emerging leaders. Why the turnaround? Why the distressed industry? Any words of advice for those who may be, I think part of what we want to do is sort of at the last third of our career is to encourage and inspire some young folks to aspire to, turn around in distress and an M&A, right? Any words of advice to some of those who may be thinking about this industry or early in their career?
Yeah. And I tell you, to echo those words, we need young people in this business. I mean, I'm sorry to all my colleagues, but I look around conferences and I'm like,
yeah,
boy, we're getting old, and we need young people. And I think the message that we're missing is that they don't know how fun this business can be. It can be remarkably fun. You can work with remarkably brilliant people. It's not just the analytics. And that's where I think people get hung up on this is that, you hear about the pre-packs and the up tiers and the down tiers and the side tiers and the upside down tiers. And it's all financial engineering, but people forget there's a company there. It makes something. It does some service. It makes widgets, and there are people that make their widgets, or there's manufacturing. And part of the fun of this business is going in there and finding out what the problems there are in that business or in management or a combination thereof, and setting about to solve those problems to help the business so that the business survives and so that people keep their jobs and are better off than they might be otherwise. And that is a very fulfilling role. I mean, that's one reason I'm still doing this after all these years. I love it. And you never know what kind of business you're going to be in next. That's challenging. So you have to be on your toes and learn quickly while you're on the fly. Yeah, but I don't think we're doing a very good job of telling young people that, because I think when they see restructuring these days, they're just seeing the big firms and all these essentially balance sheet transactions. But they're also saying, this wonderful balance sheet transaction, a year later, now it's a Chapter 22 and the company's being liquidated. Well, that's because they didn't fix the business. You've got to fix the business. And the business is all the stuff that most consultants, and I'm sorry to say this, that most consulting firms don't want to get involved in. It's the gnarly stuff like marketing and sales and people on the shop floor.
And cash flow.
And cash flow. Well, yeah, of course, that's the lifeblood. But I will tell you, honest to God, and I haven't smoked in 35 years, but I have learned more. I'll go out. If I'm running a manufacturing company, I'll figure out where the smoking area is. And I'll walk out there and folks will be standing around and I'll say, so, I haven't had one of these in a long time. Can I bum one? And I'll light it up and I'll gag the first drag down and we'll start chatting. I find out more in 10 minutes about what really works at the company, what the employees really think of management, why things aren't working, how they're not working, and what they think ought to be done faster than the board or management could ever tell me. And that is so much fun. It's just so much fun, because then you can encapsulate that and then go back into management and say, well, hey, what about this? Or, hey, what about if you fix this? Have you ever heard this before? And that makes it a very rewarding experience. Listen, it's a very hard business. Sometimes you have to, fire people, you have to replace management teams, cash flow and the business enterprise itself can be very, very challenged. And it can be, hard as a rock. But when you get it right and you're able to turn it around and know that you had a material difference in making that business better and in people's lives, that really means something.
So we have a number of emerging leaders or young professionals that are either lawyers, investment bankers, they're in M&A, they have all the right skills, I guess, all the right skills for this, right?
Yeah. And they're bright. They're so smart. They're so smart.
there's a negative connotation, right, to distress, turnarounds, restructuring. Why should they do this, right? Why should they be out? Could it be as simple as economically, hey, you could buy a company at 10 cents on the dollar rather than 10 times EBITDA.
Yeah,
if you just know how to operate it.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, there are always opportunities out there to pick up companies that are, in distressed situations, and especially in the middle market. You always hear about, the big, gigantic, multi-billion-dollar companies. But my God, in the middle market, there are always companies that are in trouble that need cash infusions, equity, and that, with that type of involvement, then you can begin to put your input on that company so it, runs more efficiently, so that it, perhaps produces a better product, or it shifts away from one product that's, a money loser into a more profitable product that isn't. That perhaps management just can't get their head around because they've been there forever. And they're like, no, but we love this product. We've been making it for all these years.
You needed some type of an outside perspective. Yeah.
Well, and see, that's
Are you hiring younger people? It sounds like you only hire older people.
Oh, no. We hire young people all the time. And as a matter of fact, I've got two remarkably bright young men, and we'd hire young women too. We just don't have that many, but remarkably bright young men. One has a private equity background, and our other director came, believe it or not, from the offshore oil and gas drilling business. He had an interest in this industry, and I will tell you, over the last 18 months, he has taken to it like a duck to water, between his analytical skills, his business skills, his business judgment, because he was responsible for his old company's underwater blowout prevention program. So he's the guy who stopped, or was responsible so that another offshore rig didn't blow up.
Yeah. Wow.
So that takes a lot of intelligence and gumption.
Yeah. You have to do that. Last couple of questions. Well, in about a few weeks, depending on when you're listening to this, we'll be at the 2025 Distressed Investing Summit. Maybe any words of advice for our young folks? Certainly we want them to. I think one of the ways you get into this business is to connect and meet other people, and to go to events like this.
That's exactly right. And I can't encourage young people who have an interest. And even if you have an interest, go to events like the M&A Advisor conferences. And whether they're in Palm Beach or New York, go just to talk to people, because that's what all of us do. You network, you talk, you get to know people in different aspects of the industry, investment bankers, restructuring guys. And you get to hear from people like Wilbur Ross, just recently, who made billions in taking distressed assets, buying them, turning them around, and capitalizing on their real intrinsic value. And you'll be around people like that, and it's a very friendly group. You even if you've never been before, it's kind of, come in, old friend, and let's have a chat.
They're sharks in business, but not in personally. They are the nicest guys, right? Guys and gals, right? And all this.
That's one reason I'm still doing this too, because, they're just a great group of people. You can fight like cats and dogs on either side of the table all day long, but somewhere, around dark 30, we're all going to be at the same bar, trading war stories.
Yeah. And this year will be, thanks you for mentioning Wilbur Ross. He'll be at our event. He actually has a home down in Palm Beach, and our opening night cocktail will be at his home.
Oh, that's going to be spectacular. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to coming down and my wife and I both.
Yeah. And come down. It's going to be a lot of fun. I did want to end with one of the questions, and then if you'll open up for if we didn't mention anything, but the new administration coming in, Trump administration coming in, we have all known, and we've had topics like this at our Distressed Investing Summit, that the government really needs to turn around, right? I mean, just the way, the debt and the inefficiencies and all
Exactly
that,
right.
and then certainly Elon Musk with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Any thoughts on that? Any suggestions, advice you can give to those that are taking on this big task? At least for me, thank God somebody's at least addressing something, right?
Yeah, I think, Roger, I think that's exactly right. And from what I've been watching, irrespective of your politics, what I've been watching is exactly and precisely what I would be doing if you called me and made me the head of DOGE, or if I was the chief restructuring officer of ABC. They're coming in, they're looking, and
our U.S. government needs a chief restructuring officer, right? That's exactly what it needs.
It's interesting.
Nobody wants to say that, right? Nobody really wants. I mean, putting the politics aside.
Maybe after this DOGE, they need to have a secretary of restructuring to take a look at this kind of stuff all the time, because you don't want to fall into the same traps. But what they're doing is exactly what any restructuring person would be doing, and that's is assessing what works, what doesn't, how much does it cost, is it cost effective, does it make sense, can we fix it, and if we can't fix it, and if it doesn't make sense, then we need to get rid of it. And so I'm very hopeful about that, because without that, we're going to find ourselves not only as a nation in real trouble, but just like companies who find themselves in real trouble. So, you can get to a point where you can't crawl out of the hole. There's just not anything you can do. And I've had to tell, management teams, whether it's a family business or big management teams or whatever, many times, I'm sorry, I would love to help you, but you're just too far down the rabbit hole, and you can't, there's just no way to pull this up.
Yeah. One of the things that the new press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, said when she started talking about the, Department of Government Efficiency and the new administration is that Donald Trump, or the president, wants to be a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars. I have never heard that.
What a concept.
What a concept.
Yeah.
Right? What a concept. And again, apart from where your politics are, and you probably guess where mine is, but, a steward of the taxpayers' money.
It's like being a steward of of shareholders' money or a company. I mean, I don't know why anybody should have a problem with that. And the thing that concerns me from our nation's economic standpoint, there's a lot of stuff that's just not so rosy out there, economically. You don't hear about it, but regional banks are way, way deep into, commercial paper and commercial buildings. And that is not a particularly healthy sector. Healthcare is just,
well, you can blame the federal government a little bit on that, on what
sure,
banks could and could not invest in. Right. So it was all, the capital charges on, non-real estate loans are higher than the real estate loans, right? So what are the local banks going to do? They're going to overweight their portfolio to commercial real estate, right?
Yeah, right. And I think that's one reason, and not just me, but a lot of us in this business think that there's going to be, a pretty decent shakeout because there needs to be. There's been a lot of extend and pretend for decades now. And, in this capitalist system, like it or not, they're like in life, there are winners and there are losers.
Yep.
And we think there are going to be some companies and some industries.
Yeah. So where do you think let's talk about the industries or the sectors you think are gonna be facing these. There might be opportunities from a distressed investing
absolutely.
standpoint. What do you see maybe in the next 1 to 3 years? Where should investors or any service providers be looking right into where they should be focused?
Aside from commercial real estate and healthcare, fast casual dining is tough. We've talked, I don't know how many fast casual places now. And as a matter of fact, one of our newer managing directors has a background in fast casual dining, and it was actually leading the Quiznos Chapter 11.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that retail continues to be distressed, there are going to be brands and opportunities for purchases there. We think there's going to be some restructuring opportunity in general manufacturing. The oil and gas industry is still in a tough spot, and notwithstanding, our president's drill baby drill, for those of us who understand the industry, drill baby drill, but where? Where are we going to drill? The Permian Basin, which has been producing for about 100 years, has been consolidating, and essentially the era of the independent oil and gas guy is all but over, because they can't afford the capital costs, and nobody's going to lend into that anymore. And I think during the shale boom, private equity, learned their lessons the hard way on that one. So we think there'll be some consolidation and some restructuring in that sector, and again in the energy sector as well. Recreation, and all of this is going to be driven by the consumer. And what nobody talks about either is that consumer debt is higher than it has ever been, ever. And so if you've run up all your credit cards, and
and that's as a percentage of GDP, or
I think it's a percentage of GDP as I'm not sure about that. I think the report I read was that it was actually higher on a per dollar basis than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But that's some real trouble in River City. If the economy starts slowing down, if people are not able to find jobs or lose their jobs for any number of reasons, retrenchment, elimination of roles, et cetera, as people try to become more efficient.
Yep. Drew, we talked a lot. I appreciate your time. We're way over time. This is an incredible conversation.
What would you expect? I'm from Texas. That's what we do all day long.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, or maybe if not, maybe you'll leave with a few words to our emerging leaders out there. Those are the ones who are listening to these podcasts. Guys like you and me don't listen to. Well, you may listen to. I listen to podcasts all the time. I think it's a great way to get into a niche subject and find out about interesting people like you.
Well, thank you for that. I think that get involved, go to conferences, go to local, restructuring meetings if they have some in your locale. Don't hesitate to stick your foot in and learn and see what it's about. Don't be afraid. I actually love it. I will get cold called or cold emailed, and some person from some college somewhere has been doing some research and said, Mr. Manigal, I'm a second year student in finance and blah, blah, blah. Could I bend your ear for a few minutes? And I love getting those emails. And I always try to call them back or answer their questions or give them some advice about, where to go, where to look. And so if I could say one word to the people who are interested, don't be afraid to reach out to restructuring groups. Don't be afraid to reach out to investment advisors or investment bankers or whichever segment you're interested in. You'll find somebody to talk to. And if you go to conferences or meetings or even have a cup of coffee, you can learn more and more fully develop your idea of what you might want to do.
So if you're down in Texas, you're open to have a coffee with any of these folks, right?
Oh, absolutely. And all our guys and gals would, because it's the lifeblood of this business, and it's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you hiring? Are you looking for more people?
We are always looking for good people. We never stop.
And how does somebody reach you? Your website, your
website?
LinkedIn?
I think we've got a place on our website to apply. Send me an email.
What's your website for those not inclined?
Is www.macco.group.
.group. I didn't know they had that.
Yep. And or drop me an email, or go on the website and find one of our managing directors like David or Pablo or Paul, or, if you're in Denver, and drop them a note and say, I'd like to learn more. Would you, could we have a 10-minute telephone chat?
Yeah.
And we'd all be glad to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Drew, anything else that you want to share, or you're?
Well, I got another hour or two if you just want to keep rolling.
Well, I don't know. I think we could do a part 2 maybe of the podcast, but we want to be wary of the acknowledging our podcast listeners' time. Some podcasts go on for 3 hours, but I'd like to keep it down to like 45 to an hour or so.
Yeah,
so
I think we're probably at the end.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Drew. I appreciate it. And then those of you who missed Drew's earlier podcast, we'll put it in the link below this one, which is the podcast in which Jack Butler interviewed you at last year's 2024 Distressed Investing Summit when you received your leadership award. And then of course, you just got recognized at the Hall of Fame. Drew, thank you very much for participating, and look forward to seeing you down in West Palm Beach.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and everybody in Palm Beach. Well,
okay.
Not too far off.
Yep. Nope. In just a few weeks. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you. See you later.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from it. If you have any questions or comments for us or any of our guests, please feel free to leave them in the podcast platform of your choice, or send us an email at editor@maadvisor.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback. And if you haven't done so already, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts newsletter at the links in the description, or on our website at www.maadvisor.com. This will help you stay updated on the latest M&A interviews and trends, and support our podcast to grow and reach more listeners like you. This is Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and founder of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay safe and happy dealing.